What would happen if one morning, you woke up and discovered that freedom had disappeared? Not because of war. Not because of bombs. No air raid sirens, no ruined squares, and no invaders crossing the border. It simply was no longer there. On the morning of April 21, 1967, Greece, a land regarded as the cradle of Western democracy, the birthplace of Plato, Aristotle, and the very concepts of demos and kratos, awoke to such a reality. Democracy was not defeated. It was taken away. And the most frightening thing was this: the one who took it away was not a foreign power, but the Greek military itself. To understand why a country with such a long political history as Greece slid into military dictatorship, we must return to the years after World War II. Greece at that time was a devastated country. Having just escaped the occupation of Nazi Germany, it immediately fell into another tragedy, civil war. From 1946 to 1949, Greeks shot at their own compatriots. The left and the right split society so deeply that the fracture never truly healed. The civil war ended with the victory of the royalists and the right, but the price was a constant obsession, the fear of communism returning. In the context of the Cold War, Greece became a strategic outpost of the West in the Balkans. The United States and NATO regarded keeping Greece within the anti-communist orbit as vital. The military was nurtured not only by budgets, but by an ideology. The army was the guardian of the nation, and the guardian of an ideology as well. But as the 1960s began, Greek democracy started to show clear signs of exhaustion. Governments changed constantly. Political coalitions were fragile. Parliament argued without end. And the young King Constantine II grew increasingly at odds with civilian governments. For the public, these were signs of a young democracy struggling to find its footing. But for a segment of the military, they were signs of an approaching collapse. In 1967, Greece was preparing for a new general election. Polls showed that the center-left, even with support from the left, had a strong chance of winning. In the eyes of many officers, that amounted to a single word: danger. And they believed that if they waited any longer, they would lose their chance to act. In the early hours of April 21, 1967, Athens was still asleep. There were no bomb explosions. No fierce battles. Only the sound of military engines rolling through empty streets. Only soldiers appearing at key intersections. Only the national radio suddenly changing its voice. Within a few hours, more than 6,000 people were arrested. Politicians. Journalists. Intellectuals. Names that had already been prepared in advance on lists. The coup unfolded with a speed that even senior generals failed to react in time. Those behind it were not powerful generals. They were merely colonels and lieutenant colonels: Georgios Papadopoulos, Stylianos Patikos, Nikolaos Makarizos. Men whose names very few Greek citizens had known before. Parliament was dissolved. The constitution was suspended. Martial law was declared. King Constantine II, though not fully supportive, ultimately signed the decree recognizing the new government. Years later, he would call it the greatest mistake of his life. But by then, it was too late. Greece entered a period that history would later call the dictatorship of the colonels. They called themselves saviors of the nation. They called their actions a national revolution. But for Greek society, it was 7 years of darkness. The press was absolutely censored. Music was banned. Books were confiscated. A single song deemed incompatible with the national spirit was enough to trigger interrogation. Torture was no longer an exception, it became a tool. Tens of thousands were imprisoned, exiled to remote islands. Even, hairstyles became a political issue. Long hair, Western clothing, liberal ideas, all were treated as signs of moral decay. In 1973, Papadopoulos declared the abolition of the monarchy and proclaimed himself president. On the surface, the regime appeared to have reached the height of its power. But inside, it was cracking. The economy stagnated. Society suffocated. Students, a generation that had never experienced the Civil War, began to ask questions. The uprising at the Athens Polytechnic in 1973 was crushed by tanks. Those images spread across the world. And for the first time, the colonel's regime lost the veneer of stability it had always worn. In 1974, they made their final mistake. The Greek military government backed a coup in Cyprus, aiming to annex the island to Greece. But the response came faster than they expected. Turkey invaded Cyprus. The threat of full-scale war loomed. The Greek military, already divided, completely lost its credibility. Within just a few days, the regime collapsed. There were no heroes. No triumph. Only the heavy silence of a society emerging from a nightmare. Greece returned to civilian government. Democracy was restored. The leaders of the coup were tried and sentenced to life imprisonment. The 1967 coup left a bitter lesson, not only for Greece, but for the entire world. Democracy does not die in a single day. It dies in small steps. When fear is invoked. When stability is placed above freedom. And when the military believes it has the right to replace the ballot. Greece, the land that gave birth to the concept of democracy, paid the price of 7 years of darkness to remind humanity of something that should be obvious. The military can protect borders. But when it judges politics, democracy will be the first victim.